Hey gang, Luke here with your friendly cop knowers, Frankie and Tennant. And it's been a little moment since we've recorded one of these videos, and one or two things have happened. We've had a wild twist in the tail, a sort of pseudo co-presidency that we're still working through between Turkey and Australia. We'll unpack what's been happening with that. There's been conflagrations in the negotiations, and then there's been actual conflagrations in the pavilion. So much stuff.
It's been a time.
It has been a time,
guys.
Everybody is safe and well. I think there were some first responders that suffered some smoke inhalation, but happily, no one suffered any serious injuries. But we'll get to that. Let's start with the bid.
Yeah.
Hey, and did either of you have negotiating president for Australia on your bingo card?
No. No, I did not. And that was my failure of imagination.
We are in a world of imagination. And what happened on, I guess, Wednesday night?
Was it Wednesday
Or
night?
Tuesday night?
I guess it's Friday, so yes.
Yeah, Wednesday night.
We have not had an alcoholic blackout. It's just been a very fluid situation in negotiations land and temporarily.
So we all woke up here in Belém to some news reports back in Australia that claimed that the bid had failed.
That's right.
That there was no hope left in this world for Australia and its opportunity to host the COP in Adelaide. Reaching out to various officials about what the situation actually was not eliciting much of a response, right?
Well, I think it was a little confusing for Australians on the ground because we'd not very long beforehand been at the ministerial reception at the Australia Pavilion where Chris Bowen addressed all of the Aussies at COP, Team Australia, and said, we're in it to win it, and we're in it to the end. And he was being very sincere in what he said. And so I think there's definitely, I think I've observed a little bit of a disconnect in the way that this particular element of the COP is being talked about at home, and what a lot of us were experiencing on the ground as we were talking to people who were very deeply involved in those negotiations.
So there was a bit of whiplash. There was a seeking for greater information. The information was, it's complicated and evolving, and indeed it was.
Yep.
And that night,
well, so I think we knew, obviously, that Minister Bowen was locked in close negotiations with his Turkish counterpart, the minister who had been here since he arrived, basically. And I think what emerged, and I think we were privileged enough to be given the opportunity to ask the minister some questions ourselves, just navigating a bit of busyness.
Give you a bit of the flavour.
colour and movement.
Colour and movement and what it's actually like to walk the very long corridor, which I have tried to coin the phrase wormhole.
Wormhole, there you go.
Yeah.
So there was a presser from Minister Bowen in which he revealed that they'd come to an accommodation whereby the COP would be hosted in Antalya, Turkey would be the president, but they created this novel new role. This is the innovation in UFCCC processes that's happening in real time here in Belém of president for negotiations, and that would be held by Australia, right?
Yes, and I mean, I think everyone who's an observer of COP processes would agree that holding the pen over the negotiations is the significant part of hosting a COP. I think as Australians on the ground, I think we're sort of receiving this information with a lot of mixed emotions, obviously, because
Confusion chief among them.
Confusion right up there. The loss of hosting a physical COP in Adelaide is obviously very disappointing. But I think for those of us on the ground, we really, I think, have been trying to understand exactly what the scope of that role means, because this particular arrangement that we are still in the process of working out the finer details of is kind of unprecedented. We haven't seen this nature of a split presidency before. And I think it's fair to say it really arose from what we understand was Turkey's, pretty clear kind of viewpoint that even though Australia had 27 of the 28 votes in the Western Europe and others group, whose turn it is to choose who hosts COP, and of course nothing at COP is decided until everything's decided, and if we had asked for, or there'd been a vote of that we or grouping and Australia was selected as host, the view put to us was that they were definitely going to veto that on the floor in the plenary, and that would have been a really bad outcome for what we're all here for, which is to reinforce multilateralism, and it would have seen the COP default to Bonn, and that kind of a COP would have looked very different.
Yeah. And so in trying to think about how this complicated and creative new arrangement is going to work, obviously we are dealing with a fluid situation where the actual deal continues as we speak to be finalised. One way it could work, and one way to think about it could be Turkey is the king and Australia is the Prime Minister, and it's good to be the king, but...
Are you suggesting Prime Minister Bowen?
I'm just saying, Prime Ministers run things.
Yeah.
And kings are gracefully on top of things.
Yeah.
And so that's one way. To completely shatter the metaphor, though, we are yet to discover just how drift compatible Australian and Turkey ministers are in piloting the giant robot that is a COP to defeat the immense giant monster of climate change. And if anyone's seen Pacific Rim, some people are more compatible than others.
I think it's useful for us to unpack what we understand to be the scope of the role that Australia has currently, but also, I guess, what the limitations on our understanding around that are in terms of the process from here on out. What we've been told, and I should stress, I think Minister Bowen has been locked in negotiations with his Turkish counterpart.
Take all this with a large grain of salt, because what we hear is that negotiations are ongoing,
yes,
and any one of these dot points could look wildly different in the actual final text which emerges from those chats.
So then just that point on procedure, what's happening now is that there is a joint statement being thrashed out, which is going to articulate, I guess in as much detail as is necessary, the various roles of Australia and Turkey in this split presidency. And in talking to media and stakeholders the other night, Minister Bowen said that in his role as president for negotiations, he holds the pen effectively on all the negotiations in the lead up to, at COP and afterwards, and is responsible for the appointment of key roles like ministerial pairs that are tasked with running different negotiating tracks and things like that. But what wasn't clear so far is, for example, who gets to control the action agenda, which is a huge part of COP. And another thing that sort of sits off to the side of negotiations, but still has a really important role to play in kind of shaping the narrative around COP.
But
right?
it seems that the nominal position was that Turkey would hold the action agenda, but we're waiting to see if that position holds. And that's one of the things that could shift over coming hours and days. So we're in uncharted territory. It would seem the reaction, the first threshold that needs to be crossed is with the Western European and others groups. Our sense is the initial conversation in that room when this wild madcap proposal was put to them was interesting. How is that going to work?
I think it's
A little bit of tell us more.
Yeah.
more questions than objections or anything like that. And I think it was also fair to say that Germany most definitely did not want to host COP in Bonn, as they are looking for solutions.
Yeah. So, I mean, the immediate threshold that Turkey and Australia need to satisfy is obviously getting to a deal that they can both live with. But then they've got to explain to the Western European and others group how it's going to work practically, and that goes to kind of division of responsibilities and clarity around who's doing what. So there's a little bit of water to go under the bridge. We're effectively, 48 hours since this initial announcement was made. We still don't have any further detail on how that's all landing, and we're continuing to monitor the situation. It'll be fascinating to see what finally emerges. But maybe we should move on to, I guess,
The other major thing that happened here in the last 48 hours?
Yeah. So we're wandering through the pavilion area now. We've made it, and all the pavilions. And in fact, as it happens, as we wander, we just happen to be in front of our old friend. Bit of foley work there. The Australian pavilion, the Turkish pavilion, and unlike when we first showed it to you, it's barricaded off.
It is.
Because all the pavilions are barricaded off.
Yeah, no pavilions for anyone today.
Pavilion action.
Because
if we spin around, they can see where it's blocked off.
Yeah, okay. So over there,
And over there. Yeah.
So,
So we are standing not too far from the place where what went down yesterday got started, which was a dirty, great big fire.
yeah.
Fire in a crowded building.
So our friend Ryan Neelam from the Lowy Institute was just launching into a session at
Very
the Australian
interesting
Pavilion.
chat, yes.
It's going to be a good one. I think he got about 4 minutes in before there was wild cries of fire.
And just maybe 20 or 30 people just streaking past,
Yeah.
like running down this corridor.
I was just over that way in the Ukraine pavilion, finishing a series of incredibly luminously reasonable remarks about artificial intelligence and its role. And we had the silent disco ear enveloping headphones on, so we couldn't hear anybody saying anything, but we just saw people running past going, what's all that about? The Ukrainians handy in an emergency.
Little experience in that area. So there wasn't a lot of formal process. There wasn't a PA system, which is quite concerning.
Yeah.
Not a lot of formal process, you say?
I mean,
Maybe none.
that's a very formal statement for what ensued. But I think credit to the people here in that almost everyone just got up and walked very calmly towards the exit, and actually, no, as far as we understand, no one has been seriously hurt here. I think a few people with smoke inhalation, so everyone managed to get out just fine.
Yeah.
But I think it is pretty concerning that there was no fire alarm, there was no PA system announcing to everyone in the venue, please evacuate, take your time, all of that. And so at some point, this will be the subject to an entirely different inquiry or line of conversation. It does feel like a bit of a failure in the planning of things, but I think everyone is feeling very lucky. It could have been a lot worse, and it wasn't.
And a lovely feeling within Team Australia. Just lots of work across the various WhatsApp groups and beyond, checking with each other, just making sure everybody's okay.
Yeah.
And also from the official delegation, checking in with us. and
Yep.
doing what they could in what is a quite challenging situation to kind of check that all the Australians are all right, because there's no like up-to-date list that one can easily reference, say who was in the building at the exact time that the fire took place.
Yeah, and I think there was a similar level of feeling expressed by delegations to the COP president about the common feeling of cooperation in the face of a common threat that parties felt yesterday, and it would be nice if a little more of that feeling remained today.
Yeah, well, look, from actual conflagrations to conflagrations in the negotiations, Frankie, you've had a day.
I've had a day.
Yeah, why don't you tee it up? So we're just going to segue into the Frankie Muscovich hour.
I don't think we've got an hour for this, but I mean, one thing that's important to say was with the fire yesterday, of course, the whole premises was evacuated and no one was really back here at the COP venue last night. And an interesting point of process, right? It was declared under the authority of the local government here, so not a blue zone anymore, which is a neutral territory for negotiations. So it needed to be made safe. So basically nothing happened formally on negotiations here after the fire. And because we had been waiting already close to 2 days for the next revision of text out of the sort of political package that's being discussed here, known as the mutirão, which is a community effort to come together and solve problems. It was obviously welcome and expected, but the next revision of the text that we had been waiting for a couple of days landed. I think it came out around 3 a.m. this morning, and so everyone woke up to what has gone on behind closed doors in negotiations on this political package. You've heard us talking about the Big Four over the last couple of weeks. That's what has evolved into the mutirão discussion. And this morning at 11 a.m, I think Tennant and I planted ourselves in the room where this was all going to go down.
I wouldn't say we snuck, but we were very strategic in getting into that room well ahead of when everybody else would want to get in there. And that worked out very well for one of us.
And so, because Tennant and I are on slightly different badge situations, I was very fortunately allowed to stay in that room, and which proved very difficult for members, of the negotiating parties to get in this room later on. So there was an informal stocktake plenary that the COP president spoke at that lasted less than half an hour. He just made some remarks saying we now need parties to come together, and we're looking forward to this mutirão session with heads of delegation. We want heads of +1 in the room, so a very tight contingent.
And he was the COP president was really framing it in the lead up to that mutirão as we need to show that multilateralism can proceed, that it can solve problems, that it's still alive, and for that we need consensus.
Which is a double-edged sword, right?
It really is.
Because, I mean, it's all great if it all comes together and that stirring call to action rallies the parties to find common cause. If it doesn't, it demonstrates or suggests that the wheels are falling off. And I don't know, how many wheels do we have left on the good ship multilateralism to hang on the metaphor?
Well, it's maybe it's in the garage for the next 24 hours, and we'll just see.
Yeah.
So I managed to stay in this room for about over 4 hours.
Oh, you've got it on your phone. Are you going to do a dramatic reading of your notes?
I'm not going to do a dramatic reading of 4 hours worth of notes I took on all of the interventions.
That would be absolutely unacceptable. That is not an outcome that we will agree to at this proceeding.
Tennant wants me to read the notes. I I think I just want to give a flavour of what's happened here. So, because we hadn't seen text for a couple of days, I think there's genuine curiosity and quite a lot of interest then in how we would see parties sort of present at this meeting, because we haven't seen anything new for a couple of days. The presidency has been doing shuttle diplomacy, so working with parties outside of kind of big meetings like that where stakeholders and observers can watch.
Yep.
So it was, I think we would have had some guesses after our initial review of the text this morning on where the concerns or the disagreements would be. But in essence, the EU made the first intervention and they came in pretty strong. They said when we came to this COP, we were hopeful this would be a COP of truth. Frankly speaking, we are not sure anymore. And the foundation of our work is facts. We will not accept the removal of science from this text. They were really very, very unhappy at the sort of really stripping out of a lot of the more ambitious kind of lines on what needs to happen on the mitigation side of things, having a regular process to review NDCs and the gaps to 1.5. They have championed a much stronger kind of process-driven response to that, wanting to see an annual review of NDCs and BTRs. And interestingly, EU ministers were in the meeting for this. So you had a Hoekstra who spoke, and at the end of their intervention, I guess they dangled a little compromise, and I'm really unsure it was helpful in the end in one sense, because they said on one of the other contentious issues, which is finance, and specifically adaptation finance, and the ask of a lot of countries to triple adaptation finance at this COP.
From 2025, right?
Yep, on current levels. And the pushback to that from the EU and developed countries is, well, we just agreed a new collective quantified goal on finance, and we're happy to talk about finance, but so long as it's all within that rubric. So essentially saying not new money on the table.
Yes.
For adaptation finance, that it's assumed that that would come through the 300 billion that was agreed last year.
Which there is a long way to go in actually delivering on
right.
that 300 billion, or the 1.3 trillion beyond that is to be leveraged from the private sector and novel sources of funding.
Yeah. So they set the scene by saying, if we can deliver more on the mitigation side of things, then yes, there is some room to move on the question of finance. And that kind of set the scene for the rest of the conversation. You then saw, a couple of other groups, ILAC and EIG, also kind of reiterate the call for more ambition. So lots and very strong language from these groups, right? The package does not meet minimum conditions for a viable package. Lots of we cannot support this in its current form type of comments. You then saw the other, I guess if you put the EU on maybe one sort of side of these negotiations, if you like, at the polar opposite of that you would find the Arab group. You had to be a little more reductive. There's a lot of nuance in all of this, of course. But just made the point that the text that was on the table did not go nearly far enough in the issues that they had sought to raise here, which is around the provision of finance from developed countries to developing countries. So, particularly on adaptation, but you have not gone far enough to meet us on that. And they were really quite, unhappy about the fact that their choice of language on the impact of, as they call them, unilateral trade measures was not reflected in the text. And they have said, they sort of made a bit of a threat in what their intervention was, which is, we've made a lot of compromise. And we have a long list of issues with this text, like it's not perfect, but they were much closer to, I would say, accepting the text as it has been provided. And said, if you want to open up these things, well, we've got a long list of things that we'd also like to see changes on.
And in terms of what's in that text,
Yeah.
on finance, the adaptation funding language is closer to the Arab Group and LMDC position than to anything proposed by developed countries earlier. The trade text is a pretty neat compromise between the views of those who purport to hate CBAM and those who are doing CBAM. The ambition and mitigation text is pretty weak.
Pretty weak. And so why those parties were particularly exercised at the outset about it. The other dynamic that became very visible very quickly was supported by the EU and others, but really pushed by Colombia, who have done a lot of work at this COP in sort of launching this Belém roadmap or transition from fossil fuels pledge, which Australia actually just signed on to this morning and joined the press conference to do that. And they made very strong interventions in the room, supported by others, that there was insufficient language in this package that spoke to the need to transition away from fossil fuels. There was a mention of that in the first issue of this text at the start of the week, and that was taken out. And so having got 80 plus countries to sign on to this Belém pledge to transition away from fossil fuels, they have been very keen to try and get something in the cover text out of this COP.
And this is I guess a continuation of the conversation that started in UAE in Dubai, right?
Yes.
And that really watershed moment which mentioned the fossil fuels and the transition away. Attempting to make that not a flash in the pan, but actually kind of something that is carried through subsequent COPs.
And that's been fiercely resisted, right?
Well, there's the rearguard action, and then there's the in one half of the conference, and there's the champions for that language retaining its currency, and it's almost like the conference is split down the middle, right?
Yes, and so wanting to push that language then provoked a response from the Arab Group and LMDCs and other groups saying, this is a bright red line for us. We will not accept any language in this final text that refers to particular sectors, energy systems, like bright red line, these talks will fail.
And you might think it is a little odd to be having a negotiation about climate change where you can't mention fossil fuels, but COP28 in Dubai was actually the first time since ever that there was any use of that phrase in a negotiated text.
Don't mention the war, gang. Don't mention the war.
Yeah.
All right, Frankie, we're going extremely long.
We are. I think
Can we?
we're almost running out of runway in the
We
wormhole.
really are.
I think.
And this is a long runway.
Yes. Look,
When we say wormhole, it's like dune sandworm length.
Right. So, from this point out, things really descended into a very unproductive space. You then started to see parties, because the president obviously realizing that this conversation was really not getting anywhere near towards moving in a consensus direction on things. Parties were just restating positions they'd already provided to the presidency over the last couple of years. He suggested breaking into huddles within the room on the three major issues, NDCs, trade and finance. Other groups said, if you're doing huddles on that, we want to huddle on fossil fuels. The Arab group said,
Huddles are
red line,
10 paces.
can't do it. Then the EU said, if you're not going to give us a huddle on fossil fuels, we don't agree to a huddle on trade. And then at that point,
And the Russians wouldn't agree to the ministers that were designated by Brazil
Yeah.
leading these huddles.
yeah, so the presidency tried to say we would really like, I think, the EU to lead the huddle on NDCs. I think we want, I can't remember
Was
who
China
it was
on trade?
China on trade, and I can't remember the other one. And Russia was like, no, you're the president, you're going to lead these.
We trust you.
We only trust you. And at that point, you just have this series of interventions on process with people not agree, like they were negotiating the negotiating kind of strategy.
Okay, so the
And at
wheels
that
have
point-
fallen off and we're in the ditch.
Yes, basically. And so where we are at as of almost 6 p.m. here was that the president called a break, came back and said, I'm going to meet with each of the major negotiating blocks in my office at 5 p.m, only 2 reps per block, and we're going to talk about how to take these talks forward.
Yep.
And that's where we are now. We're waiting to see what happens next. Just a bit going on.
Just a bit going
Tennant
on.
says, stay positive.
I
Oh, that's
do.
true. There's a little message for you. Even though the little fella,
Yeah.
he's in the strike, he's still happy
Staying
and hoping for the best.
positive.
Stay positive, people.
Yeah.
All right, gang. Well, there was a bit to cover there. Sorry for the long video, but
I'm not sorry.
There's no better way to spend your Saturday morning. You heard it from us.
we will circle back. Likely with another video, certainly with the podcast episode
Yep.
over at letmesumup.net that will wrap all this up in a nice big bow. I'm not sure what's in the present, but it's going to be beautifully wrapped. See you, gang.